dear Executive Vice President of the European Commission, dear Presidents of the EUIA Organizing Institutes, ladies and gentlemen, please let me warmly welcome you to the European Union in International Affairs Conference. My name is Florian Trauner. I'm a political science professor at the Brussels Schools of Governance of the Vrije Universiteit Brussels, and I chair the 7th edition of the EUIA conference. Please let me start with a quote. Europe must now lead the way on digital, or it will have to follow the way of others who are setting the standards for us. This statement was voiced by Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in her latest State of the Union address. It reflects an objective of vital relevance for the Union. The EU wants to be a relevant international actor and even lead in areas such as the regulation of artificial intelligence, climate change, or fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. For the next 3 days, this conference will bring together scholars in over 50 academic panels to discuss the EU's capacity to act internationally. The event will also feature 2 high-level policy-linked panels, a journal editors panel, and, importantly, an opening keynote by Ms. Margrethe Vestager, the European Commissioning, aiming to make Europe fit for the digital age. The COVID-19 pandemic has made it impossible to welcome you physically here in Brussels. However, we are confident that the EUIA app and the digital platform will allow for networking and constructive debates in a pleasant online format. You may also listen to our new EUIA podcast series or seek to compete in the Best Paper Award competition co-organized with the Journal of European Integration. And it's not all about thinking and talking. In case you long for relaxation, you may join our yoga session offered by a professional teacher or participate at the pub quiz on Thursday. The organization of this conference has been a joint effort of 5 academic institutes. It's a pleasure to welcome the senior representatives here with me at the opening panel. They will engage with Ms. Vestager after your speech and briefly present the policy-linked panels in more detail. Karel de Gucht, a former EU Trade Commissioner, is the president of the Brussels Schools of Governance of the Vrije Universiteit Brussels. Newly created in February 2021, the Brussels Schools of Governance is an alliance between the Institute for European Studies and Vesalius College, and now one of the largest hubs for knowledge on the EU and global governance in Europe. Next to the panel are welcome Ramona Koman, the president of the Institut d'études européennes of the Université Libre de Bruxelles. This institute is another founding partner of the EUIA conference cycle. Philippe de Lombarde, director of the United Nations University UNOCRIS in Bruges, and Sven Biskop, director of the Europe in the World program at Egmont, the Royal Institute for International Relations, will later join us here. Philip and Sven will moderate 2 panels with senior policymakers and academics immediately after the opening keynote. For this 7th EUIA edition, we are particularly pleased to welcome a new UK partner for the organization of this conference, the Department of Politics and International Studies of the University of Warwick. Professor George Christoph, representing BIAS, joins us online. A big welcome to you, George, and thanks for your engagement with this conference. Before giving the floor to Ms. Vestager, I would briefly thank a few persons who helped on a day-to-day basis in the preparation of this conference. A particular thanks goes to Philipp Stutz, a forthcoming migration scholar and the EUIA academic coordinator, to Jessica Calibot, the events organizer handling the digital-related issues of the conference, and to Jelle de Smet, who helped us cutting the EUIA podcasts. Other helping hands that deserve a mentioning are Sarah Sylvester, Jérôme Bleyoud, Peter Mentke, Luc Soute, Alexander Mateler, Anthony Antoine, Andre Dan, Josephine van Kannegem, Thomas Renard, Antonius Nestora, and Anna-Marie Baskin. I'm sure I forgot a few names, but please let me thank all of you. Without you, I think the conference would have been impossible. I now give the floor to Karel de Gucht, who will properly introduce Ms. Vestager. Please let me all wish you a great EUIA conference and stimulating debates.
Dear Mrs. Executive Vice President, dear Mrs. Vestager, ladies and gentlemen. Mrs. Vestager is a daring politician, and that's exactly the reason why we have invited her to give the inaugural speech at this year's EUIA Congress. Just one example is Mrs. Vestager's crusade against tax evasion, merely by multinational companies. Her approach has been a quite original one, arguing tax rulings can constitute state aid and are therefore unacceptable. Her approach received mixed blessings by the Court of First Instance in Luxembourg, but most people like me have sympathy and support for the battle she is engaged in. Without going into the details of the hugely technical nature of the decisions, it is obvious that the Court concluded that the Commission can use the arm's length principle in a state aid investigation. But the approximative nature of the arm's length principle puts a practically high standard of proof on the Commission. Furthermore, the Court confirms that while direct taxation as EU law currently stands falls within the competence of the Member States, they must nonetheless exercise that competence consistently with EU law. And this made Dionysios Pelekis, a scholar, conclude, in other words, despite the fact that the Commission seems to be winning the war, the standard of proof has lost it a couple of battles, even though Apple's and Starbucks' victories are definitely Pyrrhic. A big part of the benefits from launching the state aid cases on selective tax deals has been that it put the issue on the political agenda. An OECD deal would obviously make even further progress, and the recent Biden proposals on minimum taxation could facilitate such a deal. The EU should, however, be very careful because the definition of the taxable base will be crucial, also when considering digital taxes which ideally should be integrated into the minimum taxation. I am keenly interested in what the European Court of Justice is going to decide in the appeal instance. The ECJ has a precious appetite for teleological judgments and appetite for sign of the times. So let's wait and see. Historically, the Commissioner for Competition was, apart from the President of the Commission, the most important figure. There is good reason for that. Through the state aid disciplines, part of an exclusive competence of the European Union, the Commission can keep the Member States in check. And though they are in their 70s, that's still dearly needed. Competition was Mrs. Vestager's portfolio in the Juncker Commission. To that portfolio, she added in the present Commission digital. Digital is today's buzzword, but also a formidable challenge and probably the most defining one for the kind of society we want our children and grandchildren to live in. Artificial intelligence, including its human and ethical implications, upholding high standards of data protection, digital taxation, the role of digital gatekeepers, our industrial future, and last but not least, competition in this digital future we cannot escape, are just a few starters of the menu of our future. I would like to briefly focus on digitization in geopolitics in times of renewed great power competition. Another buzzword and a fashionable one indeed. The concept of great power competition has a tendency to narrow the global scene to a bipolar one, the US versus China. The only two states that can claim they are great power in all domains, be it military, industrial, technological, digital, and you name it. They are, though, missing what characterized great powers in the past, autarky. To reach that goal, they need allies. China is looking for them in an authoritarian way, trying to dominate them, making them servile, through projects as the Belt and Road Initiative, the String of Pearls, burden them with loans they cannot repay, imposing import and export bans and claiming an exclusive zone of influence in the East and the South China Sea. the smile with the iron fist. By the way, Madam Executive Vice President, we should come to the rescue of Montenegro to remedy their defaults on the loans from China. The US is a democracy, and that puts limits on power. They are an ally, and they will remain an ally. We have a bond with them that even withstood President Trump. They don't want to dominate us, but don't be mistaken, they want to have the lead. That's their natural line of thinking and action. There is a vivid discussion in the US on the future of American statecraft, which is precisely on how they will be able to lead in the digital age in all of its aspects. Where is the EU in these times of great power competition? Are we a great power? Do we need to be one? What are our values worth in present times and in the future? What does us make Europeans? The Executive Vice President has repeatedly stressed the need for Europe to be in the forefront, if not the driving seat of the technological race. She is right. It's about the nexus between new technologies, defense of shared values, and regulation. And we are talking politics. It's not only about reality, but also about narratives. Values are at the heart of the reality and the narrative, particularly with the proliferation of artificial intelligence, surveillance systems, web-based services, and techno-authoritarianism. The EU and the United States should walk the talk together. And although the alignment will probably not be perfect, sometimes regulations will differ and can be sticking points in transatlantic relations, we should push for regulations in domains such as artificial intelligence, data protection, and the rights of individuals in this respect. This is undeniably a cornerstone for the survival of the liberal, rules-based world order. In this, we should behave as a great power, and if we want, we are. Because we can leverage our huge internal market, because we are at our best when proposing and deciding future-oriented regulations and principled rules with the impetus of an activist and powerful European Parliament and aiming at a global reach. As Mr. Vestager put it in her address to the European ambassadors, we must uphold our fundamental rights by ensuring that technology serves humans and not the other way around. And we therefore feel honored, Mrs. Vestager, that you accepted to give this inaugural speech, and I gladly pass you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for this introduction. It makes me very much feel at home. It is a pleasure to be invited. It's an honor to be part of this event in amazing surroundings. And when you come here, you see the crystal light, you see the gold, you see the red carpet. And it must have been equally grand that time in London when Lord Palmerston, the British Foreign Secretary, he received a shocking telegram more than 150 years ago. The thing that shocked him wasn't what the telegram said. It was the fact that he held information in his hand that for the first time in human history had traveled almost instantly. And looking at the telegram, he supposedly said, "Oh my God, it's the end of diplomacy." Not the last time the British was proven wrong, but if he was here now, Lord Palmerston, I think he had been astonished to see how far technology has traveled since that day. Though perhaps he would be even more surprised to see a woman on this stage, and even two of us. But after so many years, that's hardly surprising. What I find actually most striking is how unremarkable we find all of this. How quickly we have gotten used to living digital lives. And digitization has transformed the way we shop, the way we talk to friends, even what it means to get dressed for work. It changed the meaning of industrial leadership. So now it's so much more about using data well. And like a fractal, that the changes that we see in our daily lives, they are repeated at bigger and bigger scale, all the way up to the canvas of global affairs. Digitization is changing the way that countries cooperate, compete, develop. And while it's as important as ever that Europe's foreign policy offers security, prosperity, and freedom, well, digitization means that our ability to reach those goals, they depend on how we reach out to partners across the world. Our deep integration in global supply chains provides European industry with crucial markets and essential suppliers. But it also means that our prosperity depends even more than ever on our links to the world, on our access to markets, to suppliers, not least for vital technologies as chips or AI. And, of course, on the ability of European companies to compete on fair terms with their global rivals. And the more we depend on technology, the more it creates vulnerabilities that can be used to attack us. As the coronavirus has threatened lives and livelihoods in Europe, those who wish to harm us have seen new opportunities to undermine our security. They have mounted cyber attacks on our hospitals, spread disinformation that can threaten our ability to fight the virus. Even our ability to protect our rights and freedoms, well, they are linked to actions of others beyond our shores. Not long ago, I visited a research lab in Denmark where they were using artificial intelligence to analyze the result of blood tests that can spot a whole range of different cancer types. And they can do that really early so that treatment can start and people can recover. And they have done that in a way that fully protects sensitive data about people's health. And that's a good example of what is human-centered technology. And that's an attractive vision of a digital future. But it's a vision that's not available to everyone. In other parts of the world, authoritarian governments, they are building much less appealing models of surveillance, social control, where platforms would manipulate people's choices and governments use technology to oppress minorities and to oppress the freedom of expression. And the more such models expand across the world, the harder it will be to build a successful human-centered digital ecosystem in Europe. So in this digital world, our security, our prosperity, even our freedom are deeply dependent on others around us. And this is why it's so important for Europe to assert our digital sovereignty. This is our ability to ensure that the key decisions that will shape our digital economies and societies, that they are taken within the European democracies. But sovereignty doesn't mean autarky. It doesn't mean disengaging from the world around us. Europe is a trade and investment superpower, the world's largest trading bloc, comfortably ahead of both the US and China. And trade accounts for more than a third of our GDP. It supports 35 million jobs. So I find it unthinkable, as well as impossible, that Europe would turn its back on the openness that has served us so well. But alongside that openness, we need a clear understanding on how our dependence on others, how that creates risks, and an effective strategy to deal with those risks. And there are two parts of that strategy. Here in Europe, we need the right powers and the right rules to protect Europeans from the harm that actions of foreign countries can create. And beyond our shores, we need to work with like-minded countries to create a safe and fair global digital environment. This strategy can only succeed if, as the title of this conference puts it, Europe has the capacity to act. We need the weight, we need the influence to make our own decisions at home and to promote our visions overseas. And we do start from a strong position. Our economy counts for a sixth of the world's GDP, and even that doesn't really reflect the weight we have in the digital world. In Europe, you find some of the most digitized countries in the world, and we have successfully converted leadership into influence. Our rules on privacy, for instance, have become an effective global standard. But the digital world doesn't stand still. To maintain that sort of influence, we need to stay at the forefront of digitization. And that is why in March we proposed a digital compass which sets out specific goals for transforming our economies and our societies by 2030. And the digital compass marks a path to a digital decade, where Europe can take the lead in advanced technologies like quantum computing and cutting-edge chips. It sets milestones for the digitization of businesses and public authorities and for the building of advanced digital skills that will offer good jobs for Europeans and obviously help industry compete. And these goals, they are backed by investment, the investment that we need to reach them. At least 20% of the 670 billions from our Recovery and Resilience Fund will support digital transition. So we have what it takes to shape the digital future in a way that benefits the interests of Europeans. Within Europe, that means, just to give you an example, taking strong coordinated action against cyber attacks. We've supported EU countries to develop a toolbox to keep 5G networks secure all over Europe, to be used also when countries have very different legacy. And not least, a protection against the risk that some suppliers could offer in ways of attacks of vital infrastructure. We are reforming the Network and Information System Directive to ensure a high level of protection for all important and essential economic actors in the Union. And last summer, we in the European Union, we put sanctions in place for the first time against people and organizations from Russia, from China, from North Korea that were involved in recent cyber attacks. And we're also making sure that we have the right rules in place to protect fundamental rights in the digital future. Our proposal on the Digital Services Act aims to give Europeans the same protection against dangerous goods and harmful content online as offline, while also protecting the freedom of expression. And just last month, we put forward a new legal framework that will use a risk-based approach to ensure that when artificial intelligence is used in what could be very sensitive, could you get the job? Could they get the loan? That decisions are then made transparent and without bias. We're also taking action to make sure that the economy is fair as well as open. Our proposal for a Digital Markets Act will make sure that digital gatekeepers use their powers fairly, so the millions of businesses that rely on them will have a fair chance to innovate and to compete. And just last month, we proposed legislation to deal with foreign subsidies that would harm fair competition in Europe. But this cannot be done purely from within. We don't want Europe to be an island in a hostile sea, relying on those rules to hold back a tide of global digital environment that is fundamentally opposed to our values and our freedoms. Instead, we want to work with like-minded countries to advance the ideals that we share, shaping global standards on things like AI, cybersecurity, promoting fair and open digital markets, and sharing our human-centered model of digitization. There's no doubt in my mind that such a cooperation must start with a close partnership with the United States. We don't always see things the same way. We can and we do have differences of interests and opinions. We need to have dependencies to manage as each side reassesses its vulnerabilities. But my sense is that we are moving in a direction of convergence because we share some of the most fundamental values. We agree on the importance of open and fair markets, the need to protect human rights and democracy in the digital age, important shared interests when it comes to cybersecurity. We even now have a shared understanding that the global tax system needs an overhaul so that large businesses, including digital ones, pay their fair share of tax in the countries where they do their business. And thank you very much, Karel, for your nuanced and detailed walk through what it is that we're doing. It's really appreciated. And these are the reasons why we are proposed to set up a transatlantic trade and technology council to give us a forum to convert those shared values into an effective partnership on practical issues. And this transatlantic cooperation can then be the core of something much bigger, a coalition of like-minded countries that share our digital vision. I think sometimes we forget that among all the noise about how the EU, the US and China are each going their separate ways, there are other countries too. Other countries who have their own vision, their own ideas about the digital future for their people. And just last month, I was at the G7 Digital Ministers meeting, which included guests from Australia, India, Korea, South Africa. And I was struck by the fact that we had so much in common. Same analysis, same approach, same assessment of the challenges that we face. And I'm convinced that that shared understanding can give us a firm platform of shaping our future together. We can work together to promote global standards, standards that will keep the digital world open and fair. We can give substance to our ideas about human-centered technology by working on a shared approach to regulation. And we can work together to tackle the risks that comes along with global supply chains by reaching agreements to secure supplies, underwriting trust and resilience with mutual dependence. At the same time, we also need to make sure that our vision of a human-centered digital future is reflected in the way we cooperate with partners of the Global South. Between 2005 and 2019, the proportion of Africans with internet access went from 2% to 40%. And this obviously has helped improve the lives of millions of people. And yet, it still leaves more than half the continent disconnected. And even behind those figures, of course, hides big divides, not just from one country to another, but also between city and countryside, or between women and men. For instance, Africa's gender gap in internet access is more than 30%. And in recent years, that gap has actually been growing, not shrinking as it ought to. And closing these divides can make some of the world's poorest countries make huge strides towards reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. not just the goal of universal, affordable internet access by 2030, but also other goals like better health, better education, gender equality. And that's partly a matter of building infrastructure. But infrastructure alone cannot guarantee that digitization is fair and inclusive. We have to see how certain investments can have downsides too, when it comes to exposing citizens to surveillance, repression, insecurity. And human rights and digitization are two sides of the same coin. They must come together. And this is why our new cooperation program will provide not just the money to build digital connectivity, but also help to develop strong standards for a safe, trustworthy global world in areas like privacy and cybersecurity, so that alongside the physical infrastructure, citizens in developing countries can benefit from the same sort of human-centered digitization that we expect for ourselves here in Europe. When Palmerston received that first telegram, I think he understood that he was holding the symbol of change that no one was prepared for. And in a way, we are much better off than he was. Decades of continuous digital innovation has told us to look forward. We may not know what the digital future will look like exactly, but I think we have a shared understanding that if we want to guide technology, if we want to make the most of it, so it develops in accordance with our interests and our values, we have to act now. And today, it's clear that our success in doing so will be deeply affected, not just by our own actions, but also by choices of our partners throughout the world. So this is a moment when our digital policies and our external policies, they need to come together. Because our ability to promise Europeans a positive digital future, well, to fulfill that promise, that doesn't just depend on what happens in Europe, but on how we manage to shape the world around us and to do that shaping with the world around us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Vestager, for sharing your thoughts. You have kindly agreed as well to engage with our questions, first with the EUIA organizing institutes and then with the audience of the conference. And I'm very pleased to give first the floor to Professor George Christo of the Department of Politics and International Studies of the University of Warwick with the first question. Then you may respond directly and then we give it to Ramona Koman as a second one. George, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, dear Mrs. Vestager, Executive Vice President, for a great talk. My question is related to one of your final points, actually, which seems to point to the need for a lot of digital diplomacy to accompany the very ambitious plans of the European Union, the very welcome ambitious plans of the European Union in the digital realm. So I wonder if you can say a little bit more about actually the specific mechanisms of engagement that you think will be most important for the EU in actually delivering and promoting this message, including with the US. What concrete plans are there for engagement and dialogue, and what are the key global platforms here, international organizations that the EU needs to engage with to fulfill its ambition? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. The first thing is that we are trying to establish a forum to make things hands-on and tangible. This is why we have this idea of a transatlantic trade and technology council. In order to have sort of high-level policy forum, and from that to ask sort of working groups to be specific. The second thing is that we need to involve much more in discussions at all levels. Also to appreciate how much the discussion in the US have changed over the last 5-7 years. When I was first walking up the hill in Washington with my Google cases under my arm, they were thinking, what's that woman doing? That has changed a lot. And also the opinions of the US population has changed a lot. So we try to engage also at a number of different levels in order to make new ties between us. But we try not to limit it to the US. I've just had a number of interesting conversations, I think, for me at least, with Indian counterparts. They have had a development of digitization, which is, I think, unheard of, to provide the huge majority of Indians with digital ID, being able during the pandemic to transfer funds to 400 million people, something that would never, ever be doable if it was to be done on paper. Last but not least, we have what we call sort of high-level digital dialogues with China. That allows us also to voice some of our concerns about how digital development is being used from a Chinese point of view. And then, of course, we try to use the international cooperation to reflect what we want to do. Last year, within the International Telecommunications Union, we had an attack on the Internet Protocol. It was a proposal by Huawei, supported by China, that would basically turn the Internet upside down from decentralized, ungovernable, to centralized and indeed governable. And that took a coalition to say, well, no, just leave the Internet as it is. This is how we prefer it. But that was a very good reminder that if we're not vigilant multilaterally, then also our bilateral interchanges, they will not be sufficient. And this is why I really think, based on my experience of the last couple of years, that we cannot provide Europeans with what they are asking for without working intensively with global partners.
Okay. Thanks, George. All clear for you? Would you like to have a follow-up question, or
No, that's fine. Yeah, please give the floor to others.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm pleased to turn my attention to Ramona Koeman, President of the Institut d'études européennes.
Thank you, Florian. Thank you, Executive Vice President Vestager, for your insightful talk. My question is about the main topic of this conference, which is the EU's capacity to act. As we know, over the last years, different European political leaders have invoked the need of strengthening EU's capacity to act in its external action. And discourses converge with regard to the reasons, but why or no, how to strengthen EU's capacity to act, how to strengthen EU's autonomy remains an open question. Some refer to a geopolitical commission, others talk about a European sovereignty or prefer the concept of strategic autonomy. So as I said, this how question remains open. And my question to you, because we are at the beginning of this conference on the future of Europe, is do you think that a treaty reform is needed, or just some governance adjustment would be enough in the framework of the Lisbon Treaty? I'm also asking this question because I believe that a strong legitimacy for the EU to act in its external action implies also a strong legitimacy inside within the Union. Thank you very much.
Well, I share that with you. I think that's a really good point, that legitimacy outside is much stronger if it reflects also internal legitimacy. I don't think that we have fully used what is in the Lisbon Treaty. There are many more things that we could do within that treaty framework. We could use the passerelle access to change decision making. I think there are a number of things that we can do. And the second thing is that we ought to do things now. We don't really have time to wait for treaty change with the options that we have as it is already. We have a lot of internal discussions about this because we are in new geopolitical waters. Things are changing. China, Russia, the US, India, countries on the African continent are assessing themselves in a different way than what they did just 5 years ago. So we need also to be more assertive. And I think the last sort of 4 years before the change of administration in the US, that changed us in Europe. I think it made us more assertive. It made us more aware what it means to be European. We never would we try to be a better Chinese than the Chinese, nor should we try to be a better American than the Americans. And I think that is a really healthy reflects that we have something to offer that is truly European. And then we have coined this phrase of open strategic autonomy, which is, of course, sort of a way of trying to square the circle, or maybe to tell that one needs to live and breathe in complexity. And I think that is really important, that we are willing to be in complex relationships, both here within Europe. I should not go in detail with that, but also, for instance, with China. China is an economic competitor. It's a partner when it comes to climate change. Otherwise, we will not be successful in fighting climate change if China is not on board. But it's also a systemic rival. And I think just these three parameters describes a quite complex relationship. And we need to be able to work in that without choosing just one of these different dimensions. And my last point would be to say that it's important for me to take sort of the high-level discussions about open strategic autonomy to be something that, that puts muscle on the bone. And for instance, the supercomputer that we have in Bologna, that has helped the entire world to map the coronavirus, that is now working to map what molecules could be helpful in treating the disease that comes with the coronavirus. That is sort of muscle on the bone. That is something we can do that we could not do before. The investment in quantum computing, the new coordinated plan for investment in artificial intelligence. These are all things that sort of put muscle on the bone, but doesn't scare away the rest of the world. And I think that is what we need to be able to take that kind of action in the practical manner.
Thank you. Ramona, all set from your side? Thank you. Then to explain you as well, we have a conference app, and on the app, the participants could post some questions as well. So I will read the first question posed by Michael Strange, asking about artificial intelligence and marginalized groups in societies. So he writes, artificial intelligence presents a revolution in how we organize European societies. As these systems develop, what would you ask member states to do so that marginalized groups aren't at risk of further exclusion?
That's a really good question. What we hope to be one of the effects of the AI regulation is exactly that one looks at marginalized groups not with the characteristics of what makes them marginalized, but what they need in terms of being a citizen, being a human with different problems. Because some of the issues that we've had with artificial intelligence was that it recognized patterns that was made by prejudice against people in vulnerable positions, against marginalized groups. So basically, if you had a certain postal code, you would be put in this one box. If you had a certain background, you would put in that certain box. And what we are asking is that if artificial intelligence is used in cases where there is a risk of bias, where there is a risk of reinforcing an unfortunate position, that you make sure that your data is such high quality and the working of the AI is such high quality that you prevent this from happening. And the reason why we're so particular about it is that we do not think that any mayor, any government would take the risk to onboard artificial intelligence as a supportive tool, for instance, for social benefits, if there is a risk of bias. And that, of course, means that you will need to involve people in how artificial intelligence is developed in order to make it work in the right way. And it may be so. Sometimes we're afraid of artificial intelligence. We say that it will dehumanize our society. But there may be a silver lining, because part of being a human society is that we have prejudice. And that these prejudices sometimes work against minorities. And that may give a second chance, actually, to people to be seen as who they are and not with the minority label.
Thank you. Next question is posed by Mariana Radu. So she asks, how would you define the EU's foreign policy doctrine, and what are the core elements underpinning the EU's effectiveness on the world stage?
Oh, that's way over my pay grade. Way over my pay grade. But from my pay grade position, I'd say that it has the precedent have been proven right over and over and over again to say that this commission is a geopolitical commission. And the way that we organize also complements sort of classic foreign policy with health matters, with digital matters, with matters of migration. And I think to some degree that brings foreign policy closer to home, because it becomes so much more integrated in everything we do. And I think that makes foreign policy or the relationship with people and living in other countries and government in other countries much more tangible. Because sometimes foreign policy is a language that can be difficult to understand, because it sort of escapes you. What are the specifics here? And here I think it offers new opportunities that we can say, no, let's discuss digital, because that's another way of discussing human rights. Let's discuss trade, because that's another way of discussing climate change. Or let's discuss climate change, because that's another way of discussing the world's inequalities. So I think it gives us completely new conversations that every European interest can be seen through a global prism.
Very good. And then a final question to you, posed by Kathy Kang. So she asks, what is your personal opinion on strengthening a digital union and cybersecurity? How will Europe be able to expand the infrastructure on 5G and 6G through cooperation with China or the States? What is your personal opinion on a possible EU-ROK cooperation, a possible new 5G and 6G action plan? Thank you.
Well, here, first things first. The auctions, they are just being finalized in a number of countries. One of the successes has been that the toolbox that we have been developing with member states has been used in every member state. The Union has next to nothing when it comes to competences in 5G or that kind of infrastructure deployment. And very well, because that has then put the responsibility on every member state depending on the legacy in their network, to use the toolbox to make sure that the network is secure. And right now we are promoting it in basically for everyone who shows just the most remote interest in 5G security, in order to get a connectedness that excludes the worst risk of cyber attacks or people listening in or getting access to infrastructure that can disrupt it. For 6G, so next generation of connectivity, here a lot of money is invested in the innovation part of it, but that is still, I think, I said on the basis of first things first, we need to deploy 5G in Europe as fast as possible. And the good thing is that in a number of the country recovery and resilience plans, we see also sort of the cross-border ambitions, because that will indeed be important for 5G to work sort of this industrial backbone, that we also have good cross-border connectivity.
Okay, many thanks. And we have already come to the end of your schedule and your available time. Please let me thank you again. But before I formally say goodbye to you, please let me inform the audience that the opening session is not yet over. We have actually some sneak preview for the high-level policy link panels that are about to come. So stay with us, and we will have some closer introduction on these panels very soon. But let me say thanks to you again, and Karel de Gucht, I think, will accompany you when you're leaving. Thank you. Okay, and we will continue straight away with Philippe de Lombarde, the director of the United Nations University in Bruges, who will give a preview of the panel to come. Please, Philippe.
Thank you very much, Florian, and allow me to start by also thanking Executive Vice President Vestager for her keynote speech. Now, as we are at the very beginning of our conference, allow me also to thank Florian and his team for organizing this and making all this possible. It has been hard work in difficult times, so thank you very much. But it is my task to invite you to two policy link panels that will take place after this session, not immediately after, but at 4 p.m. Brussels time. Two parallel sessions, one hosted by UNUCRIS, one hosted by the Egmont Institute, and in a few minutes I will ask my colleague Sven Bisschop to say a few words about the second of these policy link panels. The first one is organized, hosted by UNUCRIS. Now, for those who are not too familiar with UNUCRIS, UNUCRIS stands for United Nations University Institute on Comparative Regional Integration Studies. It is one of the institutes of UNU. We are focusing on regional governance worldwide through research mainly, but also a capacity building. UNUCRIS is located in Bruges and works in close partnership with universities of Ghent and the University of Brussels, VUB. Our panel is called the EU and the UN Shared Challenges, Same Vision, with a question mark, and is intended to exchange views on the present and future of this very specific partnership, very specific relationship between the EU and the UN, the EU being an organization consisting of a subset of member states of the UN. We will organize this exchange of views in I would say, a trilateral way. We will have representatives of the UN, representatives of the EU, and we will also have our academic community participating in this discussion. In our discussion, we will basically refer to two levels of interaction between EU and UN. We will refer to the global governance level, where we will look into how this partnership plays a role in shaping or reshaping global governance in general. When we talk about strengthening multilateralism, for example, but also more specifically by policy areas. We will also look at this partnership, this collaboration at another level, the more operational level, the country level, and look into how EU-UN collaborate on the ground, I would say. Let me just quickly mention the participants in this panel. We will have Ms. Barbara Pesce Monteiro. She is a UN Secretary General's representative to the EU and also the director of UNDP here in Brussels, heading the UN team in Brussels. We will have Ambassador Veronika Boskovic-Pohar, who is the representative to the Political and Security Committee at the Permanent Representation of the Republic of Slovenia to the EU. We will have Mr. Felix Fernandez-Shaw, Director for Sustainable Development Policy and Coordination at DG INPA, formerly better known as DG DEFCO. And finally, last but not least, we will have, as a discussant, Professor Mario Tello, Emeritus Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the Université Libre de Bruxelles, and also a professor at the Luis Guido Carli University in Rome, Italy. So I'm looking forward to seeing you again at 4 p.m. And I would now like to invite my colleague Sven to take over and say a few words about the second policy panel. See you at 4 p.m.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In my turn, it would of course have been a much greater pleasure to welcome everybody in the flesh in the Academy Palace in Brussels. But there is at least one advantage to having an online event, which is that everybody is just sitting in their own chairs, and in EU context, that's already something these days. I'm here to advertise the Policy Link panel that is organized by Egmont. Egmont is the Royal Institute for International Relations of Belgium, the think tank that's physically located in but mentally located outside our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, yet is closely supported by it. Our panel will deal with China. We already discussed it. You can't discuss any topic these days without mentioning China. The title of the panel is Charm or Chasm? How shall we deal with China? I think we've all been charmed by China, at least from an economic point of view, for a long time. Now there's also a certain chasm opening up. Just last December, the EU and China announced their agreement in principle on the CAI, the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment. And then a few months later, the EU also adopted sanctions against China. That seems to have taken the Chinese by surprise. Then in turn, we seem to have taken by surprise by China's counter measures, which seem to be very much an overreaction. So we are very much debating how to deal with China in the European Union. At the same time, increasingly, China is a topic for NATO, and how do these two fit together? It seems to me we are still searching. To address this issue, we will have a panel of two practitioners, Dr. Eva Groos, former colleague at the Vrije Universiteit Brussels, actually, but now policy officer in the China division of the External Action Service. Then we will hear from NATO. Roberto Zadra is head of the Global Partnerships Division at NATO. And then we'll have the academic point of view by Professor Louis Simon from the Vrije Universiteit Brussels and by my own colleague at Egmont, Tobias Geerke. Louis will talk about the EU-US dimension, and Tobias is our man on geoeconomics. It will be exciting, it will be fun, and I hope to see you all there at 4 p.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sven. Thank you, Philip. This is the end of the opening ceremony. There remains only one thing to be done, and this is also on behalf of all the other EUI organizing conferences, wishes you a great conference and great discussions in the coming days. See you again at 4 o'clock with the two Policy Link panels. Thank you.